Yeah. So Leah, what's been your journey? What's been your journey to what made you wash up on the shores of Street Epistemology's Discord server?
Yes. So I've grown up as a Christian, and whenever I was like 18, I became an atheist.
Oh wow, okay.
But it was like a one and done deal. Like I didn't really think about it much. And I just kind of went on my life. I didn't like look up videos or anything. I was just like, yeah, no, it's not for me. I don't believe that. It doesn't make sense to me. And then I was an atheist for 3 years. And then I had what I consider an experience with God. And there's like a series of events that led up to that. And so then I was a Christian. And that was in December of 2019.
Okay.
And I believe, yeah. And then I was a Christian for a year. And it was pretty much like right on the dot, like almost a year later, December 2020. I like had officially like I'd been deconstructing in my mind, and I was like, yeah, like I don't believe this anymore.
That's awesome. That's awesome. One of the things I think is underrated in today's society is the ability to change your mind. Like people are so scared of changing their mind and being seen as inconsistent. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like it's a weird heresy in today's culture that somebody might think one thing one day, but then change their mind another day. You know, that seems like a really bad thing. And it's not a bad thing. It's something that I think should be encouraged, that we should be okay with people changing their minds. Yeah, you seem really good at it. That's some dramatic changes. All right. So, oh, gosh, where to start? So starting, I guess, at the beginning, were your parents religious? Were you born into a religious narrative? Okay. So you, when you were 18, would it be fair to say that you were sort of adopted or inherited the religion of your parents, but then sort of decided you didn't understand it or didn't want to believe it anymore? Would that be something like that?
Yeah. So I think that whenever you when people go out to college, they kind of start to maybe question these things. And I was like wrestling with it, and I really tried. Like I was like being told to pray for wisdom, and I just wasn't feeling anything, and it just didn't make sense. And yeah, I actually like thought that I was like seeing demons in my room and stuff, but I was just getting so paranoid because I was like, it's not working. Like the devil's getting to me. And yeah, it was pretty traumatic, and I got really upset, and I was just like, I'm done doing this. And then when I like was done, it went away, and I was like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense. Like that, just
wow.
Yeah.
So brought up a Christian, so much wanted to believe it that you were hallucinating in your room, severely stressed and having a lot of anxiety. I
don't even know how that's possible, but I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. I mean, it just goes to show, I think a lot of people, it's not so much that the difficulties of the particular religion that are challenging, it's the wanting to believe it, needing to believe it, even though it doesn't make sense. I think that can cause a tremendous amount of anxiety. It can certainly feel like, especially a young person just trying to, I mean, everything, when you're 18, like everything is confusing, and, you know, there's a lot of new stuff going on, and like, you know, you're having to deal with trying to forge a path of your life and everything else. And so that stress on top of having to leave a religion, or confront the fact that you can't maintain a belief in a religion, that sounds like it would be very tough.
I don't really, oh, sorry.
So no, go ahead.
I don't really remember the reasons why I like stopped believing at that time. I think it had something to do with like maybe hell, or just like, why was it so hard? Like why, like, I don't know. I can't remember the details, but yeah, I just know that I didn't, and I didn't really think about it either. I just kind of went on with my life. So
how big is everybody's experience with religion is very different. So how important was religion to your family life and your upbringing, would you say?
That's another thing.
I've lost your audio. You've disappeared on me. Oh,
yeah, someone just tried to call me. Hopefully they won't try to do that again.
That's okay, no worries.
I might have to text them. But what was I saying?
We were talking
Okay.
about how important the religion was in your family life.
Yeah, it was I don't know how to say this, like we were not super extreme.
Mhm.
So it was important, but it wasn't super important. And it was more important when I was a kid, or I was more wrapped up in it when I was a kid. We were going to church like 3 times a week. We were like, all of our friends were.
Oh, wow. 3 times a week.
Is that right? Yeah. Because Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And just like all my friends and like my parents' friends were Christians, and they were our neighbors. And it was like a whole thing. And then when we left that church, things kind of got a little less. And then when my parents divorced, like I was going to 2 different churches, and just things got even more less. So I think that it wasn't a very important part of my life as I got older.
But
And
still,
then
at the age of 18, it was very stressful for you still to contemplate leaving religion.
Yeah, but I guess it was. It wasn't like super stressful, but like it was. Maybe it was super stressful, but for a very short time, it was stressful.
Right. And you can't remember specifically what it was that made you decide you didn't believe it?
No, I probably could go back and find like my writings or something and be like, oh, that was why. But
nothing springs to mind. No problem. So then, how long was it then between that event and then the event that caused you to return to Christianity?
I think it was about 3 years.
Right. So three years atheism, and then suddenly something happened to you. Do you mind talking about that? This all seems rather personal stuff, but it's interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of a long story, but to make it short, I guess.
Feel free to make it as long as you like.
Okay. Well, so I was living in Kentucky, and I'm from Missouri. So I have family in Kentucky. I moved to Kentucky, and I was with family, but I wasn't with immediate family. I was with like my aunt, and my grandparents lived there, and my cousins lived there. And I was just like living there for, I don't know, I think I lived there for like 6 months or something. But at the end of it, right before I decided to go back home, things kind of weren't working out there. We hadn't gotten an apartment. We were still living with my aunt. I didn't get a job. Like it wasn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. And I was just kind of in a really low time in my life. And I was dealing with, I mean, I don't mind saying these things, so I'll just say it. I was dealing with a binge eating disorder. And so just to kind of give you an idea of like how low I was in my life, I like was really like craving something. Like I know I was. And I just kind of had this thought for the first time in 3 years, like, oh, like my mom had given me this book, actually, this Christian like book on like relationships or something. And I read like 20 pages. And something in the book made sense. It's probably something just stupid. Like, I don't know, just made sense. And I was like having a thought like, wait, like what? I've never read the Bible before. Like, what if this is like the truth? Like, I don't know if it is or not. I think I kind of forgot the reasons why I maybe stopped believing. And so then I just kind of like had that thought. And then I remember calling my mom and opening up to her about things I was going through in my life, how I had depression and was going through that eating disorder. And then I moved back home because she encouraged me to. And then I started going to church with her when I went back home. And I kind of like opened up my heart to like more things. Like I was just in a really open place where I was like seeking. I was looking for something. And I was really low and vulnerable. And I just kind of kept going towards church and going like towards conversations. Like I was open to it. Like if anyone were to talk to me about anything to do with God, I would be very open about it. Like I was wanting to believe it. But I don't think I knew that I was wanting to believe it. I think I was just going through the motions. And then there was this boy that was like a part of it. he was Catholic, and that kind of got me like researching more stuff, like what do they believe, and like, do I even believe there's a God? Like, we just had some conversations, and then I remember going to the library and getting some books about, I had went to the library with the intention to buy some books about like the other side, like maybe like why God is not a good explanation of things, or why Jesus or isn't a good explanation of things. Because in my head at that time, actually, I wasn't even thinking about God. I was thinking about Jesus. Like, I don't know. This is the only one on my radar. So,
yeah.
And then I ended up leaving the library with the opposite. Like, why, like, oh no, this is what it was. Okay, sorry, I'm remembering wrong.
Okay,
I went to the library trying to find books about why Christianity is true, and then I left with the opposite. Yeah. But I didn't end up reading them. I got home and I felt really bad because I'm like, why am I being so negative about things? Like, I need to not, like, I felt like my heart was like being closed to things. So I just put them under my bed. And then I went, I think it was around Christmas time, and like my family, we went to a bunch of, we like went to visit family, but there wasn't enough room for us. We were like at the hotel, like a bunch of us were at the hotel. And just like, I was in a hotel room with like my best friend and my brother and my sister and my cousin. And we just stayed up till like 3 a.m. talking about God. And I thought it was a coincidence because we never do that. But I didn't really think it was a coincidence. I was like, oh, something's going on. And like my brother had said something that night that really stood out to me at the time, that made sense to me. He goes to a like Bible university, and he was just talking about stuff that he like had been learning. And one of them was like, oh, like man, like there's not a need that man has that cannot be met. So like if a man has the desire to like eat food, like he has food, like if he's thirsty, he can drink, if he's tired, he can sleep. And he was like, if you take a man and you like put him out in the woods, or a human out in the woods, and just like from birth, like they just grow up, like you don't teach them anything, they're gonna have this innate like need inside them for like a God. That was what his argument was. And I was like, that makes sense. And it made sense to me. I don't know, because I was looking for something and I hadn't found it yet. And so yeah, so then I think it was like a night or two later from that, I was just at a point where I was like, God's been like showing up so much in my life. Like, he sent this guy that I had. So actually, about the guy, I had liked the guy for like 2 years. Like kind of liked him, like whatever. And then and then he like, I didn't even know he was Catholic. And then like once we started talking again, then we like actually started talking this time and found out he was Catholic. And so I was like, oh, everything like was perfect, like lined up perfect. Like I thought God was like chasing me, basically.
Yeah.
And so I had this experience in my room where I was just like, I remember like laying in my bed, just like looking in the corner of my room and just praying to God for the first time in belief, like since I was a kid, but really understanding things this time and just being so grateful for life. And I just remember like thanking him for like my family and like my life and for just like trying so hard to like get my attention and just like for everything. I was so thankful. It was just like this feeling of awe and love, and it was just so overwhelming and just powerful. And I felt like kind of how you feel when you hear like when you're like at a concert and you're just that amazing feeling, or just like when someone like shows you a great amount of like compassion or something, and like I don't know, it's just like I couldn't comprehend it. I was so overwhelmed. I was like, this is the Holy Spirit. And
often labeled that way, for sure. Yeah.
And from that point on, I was just riding a high. Probably for like at least 6 months, I was riding a high, and there'd be some down days, but mostly I was just so excited. I didn't think there was a place after I died. So I was like, I wasn't even looking for this. And oh my gosh. Like, so it was just like, I completely believed it, and it was fun. And actually it helped me grow in many ways, even though I think there are some like negatives to Christianity or religion. It was a positive for me in some ways.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah, I mean, look, if there were zero negative if there were zero positive, components to religion, it wouldn't be very appealing to anybody. I mean, I think there are appealing components to it. There are comforts to be had there, and there are, especially within the context of community as well. This sort of idea that groups of people coming together with a shared belief and supporting each other. That's a very powerful thing. Religion ties itself up into ideas of family and identity, and ties itself up in all kinds of sort of warm feelings, and those things are real. I mean, community, family, and warm feelings are real things, and religion sort of ties itself up with those things. So it's certainly not to say there's nothing good about religion or nothing good about the experience. I could totally imagine it would be quite comforting if you're feeling distraught. I think Dostoevsky. God, I can't say that name today. But anyway, he described religion as the heart of a heartless situation, hope in a hopeless world, and I think that's kind of a nice way of thinking about the good side of religion, and I can see how it has its charms and appeals for sure in that sense. So warm fuzzy feelings for 6 months, but it didn't last long, or it didn't seem to last much longer.
Then it was kind of like, kind of apathetic, not apathetic, but like, then I just started wrestling with things that I was coming across, and then I would just kind of like try to distract myself and not think about it because I didn't want to like not believe. But like, I think like once I started having doubts, I like watched a deconversion video on YouTube, like someone like saying their experience. And then I was like, nah, I watched the whole hour thing, and I was like debunking everything they said. And then I just didn't think about it, and I would just like dive into my Bible, but I didn't feel good like I did in the beginning. Right.
So that the warm fuzzy feeling left, and you just left with it not really feeling like you could still believe in it. So
not yet. I still believed in it, but
you still believe
things didn't make sense, and it hurt.
What kind of things didn't make sense?
Calvinism. Calvinism is what started it for me.
Could you explain that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people say, some people that I listen to, like, that was what started it for them. But like describing that as like John Piper, and I don't remember the others, but there was like these 3 main pastors that I listened to on YouTube. John MacArthur, maybe? I don't know, but I really like went to them when I had questions for things. Like, I would type it on YouTube and I would see what they said on it. And when I found out that they were Calvinists, I looked up what that was, and basically like this idea of we're too broken to like pick ourselves up. Like the only reason that like, so God gives us the power to believe. That's what Calvinism. Are you familiar with Calvinism?
I'm aware of the term. I'm not entirely familiar with I'm aware of the disposition of those who believe it, but not what the nature of it actually is. So I'd be interested to hear about it.
There's like 5 things like that describes what it is, but the one that bothered me was how like we don't have the power to believe. Like, God gives everyone the power to believe, and so it's not your free will after all, basically. But at the same time, you should be held accountable and you should be punished. So like, God's a good God, but he gets to pick and choose who's going to go to heaven and who's going to go to hell, and it's not your fault. And I was like, there's no way they believe this. And they do. And it makes sense to them. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And they're in this book more than I am. And I hadn't even read like a third of it.
Right. Yeah, there's one of the things. Is that a cat? I honestly, the more animals on the video, the better. It just elevates the. Feel free to let someone. Hey! Oh wow, that is a stern looking pussycat.
She is He can be kind of mean, but yeah.
That was a hell of a look. I love cats. So I do this a lot. I talk to people a lot about their stories, and one thing that seems remarkable is somehow just it's not usually, the story doesn't usually go some clever atheist comes up and explains everything to the person and then it all falls away. What tends to be the case more often than not is just something of the sort of self-contradictory ridiculousness of religion. Sort of people just can't help but not notice it eventually. That seems to be the most common way I think people end up leaving religion, is because they just notice that it's just so, this can't make any sense. The moment they try to take it seriously in the way that, not in the special way that people normally think about religion, which is the sort of special way of thinking about things, but the moment they try to think about it in the same way that they think about normal everyday things, the usual sort of logical, rational processes that you apply to everything else in your life, the moment you apply those to sort of some of the ideas in religion, you do get this moment where you're like, what? How is this possible? And I hear this happening sort of time and time again, that it's these kind of, it's not some clever influence from the outside that's sort of confused theists and converted them to the dark side, so much as just the sheer ridiculousness of it sometimes just is enough to make people just notice that and suddenly find themselves. And this is the sad part, is and kind of relates to as you were describing it. It doesn't make them happy that they've noticed this. It's just that they can't not notice it once they have. I mean, it's a difficult journey, but it's being intellectually honest enough to know, like, I can't ignore that. Right? This doesn't make any sense, and the people around me that are telling me to ignore it or keep asking questions or pray on it it's not an answer. It's just not, and it doesn't make sense. And I hear this quite often, and it's fascinating for sure. So your faith was undermined by Calvinism and these ideas and the sort of self-contradictory nature of this belief. And then, so how did that lead you to? How would you describe what you believe now? Do you consider yourself to be an atheist again, or are you still somewhere in between, or where are you on your journey?
I call myself an agnostic atheist.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Why do you describe yourself as an agnostic atheist?
Because I want to make it clear to other people that they can be synonymous, or they can coexist. I don't know. Like, I don't know, and also I lack a belief. Yeah.
I don't know is the best answer to every question. Like, there's saying you don't know is great. It's a really liberating answer as well, because it frees you from the burden of having to find an answer to a question that functionally, like, humanity's been on the search for since it could think, and just to be able to say I don't know is, I think, quite liberating. So how did you get from your discomfort then with Calvinism to your agnostic atheism?
So Calvinism, so I wasn't a Calvinist at the time. Like, I didn't consider myself that, but it just bothered me that some people who had read the book more than I had come to that conclusion, and who had studied it. And I know that there's just a group of people and that's it, but it still bothered me. And I remember talking to my Christian friend at the time, just being like, can you believe this? And she's like, you just don't understand. Like, you just have to, like, believe our way, basically, is what she was saying. And I'm like, but I'm not going to say her name, but I'm like, I say her name, and I'm like, but have you even read it? I'm like, we haven't even read the book. We don't know what's in there. For all we know, it could be that. And she's like, you just don't understand. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. But yeah, so it kind of, like, started the journey of me realizing that I kind of possibly I may have jumped the gun in believing things, but I didn't actually, like, know that's what I was thinking. But, like, it was just it was making me want to read what was actually there. And so I think I kind of just jumped to, like, I think that's why I watched the deconversion video, because I was like, okay, like, why are other people leaving? Like, what are the reasons? Because I don't even know them. And I saw the reasons. Like, I watched deconversion video. This was actually months later from the first deconversion video. So I don't know what was happening in the meantime. I think I watched one, then dived in and tried to go to my pastors for questions and didn't look at the other side. I tried to watch like apologetics or apologists. But then I saw the issues that they had. And then I went to the Bible and I like saw them for myself. And I didn't study it. So I just kind of looked at it and was like, this says there's slavery. This says that there's slavery where they're treating people badly. And there's verses where God's like commanding that a bunch of children be slaughtered. And just going back to like verses about like Paul and like the way that he like looks on women. And then also I'm a vegan for ethical reasons, by the way. And at the very beginning, it bothered me how there was animal sacrifice, but I explained it away because like God needed to like have us slaughter animals so we could understand how bad sin is. And that was the only way he could do it. So then I was starting to reevaluate. Yeah. Then I was starting to like reevaluate like, okay, God made animals. Like he probably loves them. Like if he's a good God. So like, why did he give them the ability to feel pain? Or as far as we're concerned, I guess, feel pain because we're not them. And then he's taking pleasure in their blood, the aroma of their blood in the Old Testament. And I was like, I'm not okay with these things. And then that wasn't the reason though. That wasn't the reason I left. The reason I left is because I started looking at all that and I was just like, okay, like I'm not okay with this. But then I started asking myself like, Leah, why did you even start believing this in the first place? Like, what is the reason? And what it came down to for me was like the experience in my room, like that solidified everything. Yeah. And I always went back to that. And then afterwards, how good I felt, that was like evidence to me that I had the Holy Spirit because I was excited and I was thankful and I wanted to change the way I lived. And I did change the way I lived. I did.
Yeah.
But not all those things I think needed to happen. Like I don't think I needed to stop watching porn, but I did. And it's just like stuff like
certainly
that.
Frees up some time in your day for other things, I'd imagine.
Yeah. But it's just like little stuff like that, I guess. And so I lost my train of thought.
So you were looking back at that moment and the revelation sort of feeling of the Holy Ghost, of the excitement, the sort of feeling, and then you made a bunch of changes in your life and that those resulted in a positive outcome. But yeah, I think you were starting to question whether that was really God or whether that was you.
Yeah, I kind of started being like, okay, like I started evaluating like that experience, like what happened there. Is that evidence for the Christian God? And then it made me think, well, that could be evidence for a God, but why did I jump the gun with a Christian God? Like why? And then I kind of started thinking, I think it's because I started hearing some of the atheist arguments, or not the atheist arguments, but the deconversion videos I had watched, like the conclusions they had come to and like questions they had about like if I was in the Middle East and I was like an Islamic girl, like if I had that experience in my room, would I attribute that to Allah? I probably would.
Yeah.
And so my experience alone was not good reason to believe that. And then I also came across a YouTube video that I wish I could find again. Maybe I could, where it was talking about how we have like a God area in our brain where if you hook them up like in a lab or something and like touch like something in your brain, that it like makes them feel like this presence in the room is with them, that makes them feel like awe. And it's just like, it's like this thing that you can touch that makes them. And so I started thinking like maybe this experience happened in my head and it wasn't happening outside of me.
That's really cool. Yeah, one of the arguments from personal experience are sometimes the most difficult to discuss with somebody because that I can't know that you didn't have a personal experience of God, for example. I can't say that I know that didn't happen. So it becomes a very difficult thing to try to get somebody to notice why a convincing personal experience that they're having might have not been what they thought it was. it's a hard thing to do. So to do it on your own, to look back and reflect on that experience and recognize that it may have felt one way, but it might not have been attributed to the cause that you thought it was, is remarkable. And all power to you. That's hard work that a lot of people don't do, I think. And it's a shame more people don't think about it like that. There's some really interesting stuff. So, for example, one thing we know for sure is that if you take certain drugs, that you will have a very transcendental experience. You'll feel connected to the oneness of the universe. You'll start to see patterns. Knowledge will seem to be available to you. You'll leave your body. You'll suddenly become all of these things. So what we know is there definitely are places in your brain where if there's certain amounts of chemical activity, you'll get this sort of awe-inspiring feeling. And you can just induce that with chemicals, or you can induce that with meditation, or you could induce that in many other ways potentially. So it's certainly convincing to a lot of people that there's real experience there, and it is a real experience to the person. But there's certainly a tendency, as you say, to attribute it to an external agency or to envisage a presence in the room. And this is a real experience in the same way that any other experience is real to you. So how are you supposed to distinguish these things? And it requires you to recognize that your brain is capable of creating real experiences that aren't external to you. That's just the reality of it. One example I always give here is, hey, if I drink too much, the room is definitely spinning around. I mean, it isn't, but it definitely is, right? And you can tell me all day that it's not really spinning, and I'll know it's not really spinning, but it's still totally spinning. It doesn't matter that what anybody ever tells you. So the reality is, your brain is what's orchestrating all of this stuff, and I think I wish people really thought about that more often.
To add to that, even without taking a substance, like I deal with anxiety, and sometimes it feels like I feel dizzy as well.
Right.
And that's nothing's happening but inside me. So.
And anxiety is a great example of it, and not a great experience for sure, but it's another great example of it. That's often associated with fear and trepidation without an external cause. It's your brain is starting to panic, adrenaline starts to flood, you start to panic because your body's going into fight and flight, and there's no external cause. It's just a trick of your brain that's sort of, your brain has learned a habit that's not good for you. And yet it's still a real experience. Like it's not being scared. It is being scared, but it's just there not being an external cause for that. So the feelings, speaking recently to a lot of people in the Mormon faith who've been talking about how the Mormons have got this whole audio visual experience, beautiful music swelling, amazingly bonkers movies that they play
I watched
in their temples. You've seen these? Oh, awesome. I'm so glad. Did you see them? With the amazing hair? Like, so good hair.
Wait. I was listening to it. I didn't.
Oh, you have to watch it.
Okay, no. What I'm saying, I saw your interview with, I don't know, was it Sunshine or was
Sunshine? Yeah. Sunshine was talking about it. Okay, so you have to see
the videos.
So I can send you a link to the video. It is phenomenal. If there is an argument for God, it might be the hair that these guys have. The hair is amazing. Like I am super jelly anyway, because like I have no hair, but like the reality is their hair may be biblically created. It's phenomenal hair. The actual thing itself is absolutely bonkers. It's phenomenal. But anyway, the point I was going to suggest is that they swell the music. There's beautiful imagery. There's crescendo moments, right? And we enjoy those experiences in movies, in plays, in concerts, as you say. Like, you get the warm, tingly feeling. You get the kind of, it's like, oh, wow, the sudden overwhelmingness. Your brain sort of just lets go of trying to understand it and just enjoys it. And those moments are real. They happen to us. Those experiences, those feelings are real. And religions have learned, I think, or some religions more than others have learned to embrace that, and they say, well, that's the Holy Ghost. I mean, look at the Pentecostal churches, the African American churches. The whole service is just one long like thrill ride of elated singing and dancing, and I mean, who wouldn't feel great after an experience like that? Like that sounds like it'll be a hell of a good time. And you're going to then feel good. You're going to feel like remarkable, and the next thing you know, you're being told, oh, that feeling, that's the Holy Ghost. Okay. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
Believe it if you will. But it's interesting that now this is something that they want to lay claim to. And then, of course, the other thing I hear often, which makes me even more alarmed, is this idea that people feel that when they feel inspiration or enthusiasm for something, or they find something fascinating suddenly, they want to attribute that to God as well. God spoke to them or convinced them. No, you just had an idea. You were just inspired. You just used your imagination.
Yeah.
These are very human things, and you can attribute it to God if you want, but you're sort of doing yourself a disservice in the process, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also, sorry.
It's popped up there. That's fine. That's
And
remarkable.
Sometimes coincidences happen, and we
Right.
like really cool coincidences where you're just like, that could only be a God thing. But like sometimes crazy things happen, and maybe we're just noticing it because there have been so many times when non-crazy things happen. So the one time a crazy thing happens, we're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah, the thing about remarkable things, there's an author called Terry Pratchett. I don't know if you've ever heard of Terry Pratchett. He writes these very silly comedy fantasy novels, but he talks about this idea that wizards know that some things are just 1,000,000 to 1 chance, and then he says, but the thing is, witches know that 1,000,000 to 1 chances happen 9 times out of 10, and this idea that 1,000,000 to 1 chance can happen 9 times out of 10 is actually not unrealistic. Really, really rare events are in themselves really, really rare, but if you think of the number of events that occur in your day, like the number of things that happen to you in a day.
Yeah.
Even if there's just one of them that happens to be 1,000,000 to 1 chance, it wouldn't be that surprising. 1,000,000 to 1 chances happen all the time. We underestimate the number of things that happen, and over a long enough time period, it would be remarkable, in fact, if you didn't see things that were just 1,000,000 to 1 chance at least a few times in your life.
Yeah.
And
So-
that can be really compelling to some people.
Confirmation bias. That's kind of what we're talking about right now.
Right. That's exactly it. Yeah. Confirmation bias. It's a very compelling problem. Confirmation bias is probably one of the most insipid components of, I think, people, because it harms people who are genuinely trying to in some way justify. They're not confident, so they're looking for an external confidence, and they're finding these examples and obviously cherry picking and then interpreting them in a slightly unhelpful way, and as a result, their confirmation bias is letting them see what they want to see. But it's kind of concerning, because underneath that there is somebody at least feeling the urge to try to at least pretend to look for evidence, So yeah, confirmation bias can be a bit tricky. So from feeling like it didn't make sense and watching deconversion stories and sort of slowly finding your way, I guess, painfully and awkwardly back out of religion, how did you wash up on as I say, the shores of the SE Discord server? Was it a case of YouTube throwing things at you, or?
I don't know.
Do you remember when you first encountered street epistemology?
No, but it was within like the last year. But I think that it was more recently, like within the last couple of months.
Gotcha.
I think. I don't know. I must have been looking at something, but it popped up. Anthony, his street interviews. That's the only thing actually that I've watched. I've only watched. That's my only example of street.
It is the most common route into the server is finding one of Anthony's videos. He's been doing it longer than anybody. So the journey of street epistemology has been that there was a book written, God, I don't know, like 2010, I think, maybe even earlier than that, called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And in there was this idea of street epistemologists, which were people that would roam the streets and sort of challenge people to try to think about why they believe what they believe. And explicitly in that book, it was about challenging people who had religious ideas and challenging them to explain not what they believed, but why they believed it to be true. What was their epistemology behind it? And a lot of people didn't really resonate with that book, largely because it was a manual for creating atheists. Even if you were an atheist, it didn't seem like the sort of book that would create the kind of nice atheist that you want to be. It would seem like the sort of book that might create the kind of obnoxious atheist that you don't want to sit next to on the bus, the kind of not great atheists. So, but Anthony read the book and he really found the tools inside the book because Peter Boghossian he borrowed a lot of the ideas from philosophy and psychology and clinical psychology and from things like hostage negotiation to learn how to have more effective conversations. And Anthony at the time was trying to, he was having sort of angry atheist conversations, sort of shouting matches with street preachers and stuff and not really being very effective. Yeah, he was really struggling to have effective conversations. And so he thought that actually some of the ideas in the book might allow him to have more effective conversations with people. And so he started to apply that. And basically that's the start of his YouTube channel, was that he was recording these videos because he also noticed that nobody had made any attempts to do this. Nobody had tried to put this idea into practice. And basically that must have been, as I say, 2010. So this must have been 10, 12 years ago now. And I don't know, how much of that was Anthony's been doing it, but he's been a long time. And since Anthony started to practice it and more people have gotten involved, the whole anti-theism, like kind of atheism narrative within the community really has been completely sort of scrubbed away from the idea of it. It's not really about atheism or theism. It's not really about any particular view or belief. It's just about trying to understand, like honestly ask people questions to help them think about why it is they believe what they believe, and just see if they notice something, whatever it is you believe. So I could have a street epistemology conversation with you as an atheist and ask you, what's your confidence in your belief that there is no God, for example, if that was a claim you would want to make, right? As an agnostic atheist, I should imagine that's probably not a claim you would make, right? And that's kind of part of that agnosticism bit, which is really good. But in theory, if you had a claim about anything, we could talk about it using the street epistemology conversation style and try to understand what's your underlying reasons. And it sounds like that's something that would have been really useful to you, I think, in your journey, because a lot of it sounds like what you were struggling with was thinking about the reasons why people were believing what they were believing and why you believed what you believed.
Yes, and I was looking around at a lot of people and they held a belief, but they maybe didn't even know what they believed. So like there was a couple people in my life who hadn't even like read like a third of the Bible either. And it was just like, they were like mentoring me. And I'm like, but you haven't even read this whole thing.
And this is the strange thing. It's like religion is something that we respect people who believe it, but don't know why. They really don't know why. They believe it because they just know that they should, or that it's a good thing to say that they do. So the point about street epistemology is you don't have to go out as an atheist and say, no, you're wrong, it's not true, you don't know, this is wrong. You don't have to give them arguments essentially and tell them that they're wrong, because that just makes them defensive and indicates that it's not a helpful way to have a conversation. The sort of underlying idea of street epistemology is just to say, hey, why do you believe this is true? And actually just sometimes just even bringing their attention to it, making them think about it enough to stop and actually give an explanation will make them notice that they don't really know. And furthermore, we would do something like, one of the things that we can do that's a useful tool is a thing called an outsider test. And an outsider test is really similar to what you were describing with if you were born in Iraq, for example, and in the Islamic world, you would probably be attributing your experience to Allah, right, rather than Yahweh. And so the idea that you recognize that was essentially you performing an outsider test. An outsider test basically says, look, if somebody else was standing next to me had the exact same experiences, but were attributing it to someone else, some other God, Like, how could I, as an intermediary, know which one of you is correctly interpreting this? And it's really hard, of course. You can't know that it was Yahweh that was talking to you, even if you did still believe that it was a god. And what's the odds that it was a god after you start to think about it that way? So these are really fun things. Sorry, I interrupt.
No, you're good. You're the one leading things. You're eventually going to get to my question that I wanted you to ask me, right?
Oh, your question was interesting. Let me look it up. I remember it was. Why is it that you can see things a certain way but other people can't? Was that right?
Yeah, that are looking at like the same information that I am, or something. Like if I'm explaining like my deconversion process to someone and I give it to someone, they might be like, okay, but that's not enough for me.
Right. That's a great question. Why is it that some people see the same information and come to different conclusions?
I think I have. You do what you think.
No, I'd love to hear your answer first, if that's okay.
Okay. I think it's because I think part of it, at least, is because of things like confirmation bias. So like a lot of people tell me, well, I've seen so many things in my life that there's no way that is not true. Like I can't deny it. And I think that once confirmation bias builds up over like 30, 40 years or something, it's just like, you don't remember all the times that like things didn't make sense to you. You only remember the times that things confirmed it for you. And so it's like so hard to get out of. But then I also think childhood indoctrination is a huge thing. Even though I grew up this way, it was not drilled into me. It was more of like I was surrounded by like the culture and like socializing and stuff. And like I do remember talking to God, and I do remember like memorizing verses and I remember like asking for forgiveness and like becoming a Christian and stuff, but it was real to me, but like it wasn't everything we did. And I think that some people, like my dad, for instance, who his dad was a pastor, I think that he was more heavily indoctrinated. And that is something that I can't relate to. And I don't know what it's like, how do you change your mind whenever you were a kid? And that was just, I don't know if it's even, I mean, maybe, I'm sure it's possible. I think that people have done it, but I think that could be why some people don't get out.
I think that's certainly a huge part of it. There's a slightly sinister thing that used to be said by, I believe, the Catholic Church, which is it was I think attributed to some famous character in the Catholic Church. But the injunction is to give me the child, and after I think it's 8 years, I'll give you the man. And the idea is that something like 8 years of religious indoctrination would be sufficient for you to properly have gotten yourself a believing lifelong Catholic. Something like maybe it was 11 years, but in any case, it's some nefarious. They know that essentially getting the kids to believe is a good starting place to making sure that the adults stay faithful. It's a very well tuned machine. You look at how many church schools there are. This is an alarming crossover between certain areas of the world.
And I went to a Christian school up until 4th grade.
Right. And so you're not going to hear an awful lot of contradictory information, I would imagine, under that context, right? It's not, I mean, some schools I've heard some Christian schools are better than others, but it would seem less likely, I would imagine, that you would be hearing contradictory information or different explanations for how things came to be. And that's a problem. Schools and religions and the way that religion deals with children is definitely huge. We have massive amounts of cognitive biases. Confirmation biases is definitely one, but there are so many of them. Our brains are not great at spotting certain patterns of convincing information. We're just fallible humans. We make mistakes. We want to believe things are true. We look for patterns. We find them even if there aren't any patterns. We especially love to attribute agency to things, even when there is no real agent behind it. And we're designed to do that because it actually is survivally beneficial to us. But the reality is, I think everybody who maintains a faith position, I think they do it for very different reasons. It's usually a combination of a few things. There's a chap called Pine Creek that talks about hope, meaning, and purpose as being the trifecta of the main reason that people believe. So it either gives them hope, it provides meaning for their life, or it provides a purpose in their life. And those are the key components, I think, that I don't disagree with them. I think that's a good way to frame, I think, why a lot of people hold to a religious
Hold on
view.
a second, sorry.
Yeah, no
She's
problem.
being mean. She's attacking me right now.
Not happy at all. She's just like, this needs to end. Clearly she's Christian and she's not up for all of this.
It's time to eat soon. That's what it is.
I get you.
I'm sorry.
That's so good. So yeah, like I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with saying I don't know. As we said at the beginning, I don't know is a great answer, and but a lot of people find it very uncomfortable. If we say, you know, what created the universe, how did we get here? The answer is I don't know. I've got no idea. It's
so sorry.
No,
so why do you think that some people do over others? Like, do you think that for some people, like, it's more important to them to find meaning, or they just can't find meaning and purpose in other ways? Or
possibly, yeah. Well, they've learnt to, I think, find hope, meaning, and purpose in a particular way, and to let go of that is uncomfortable. Saying I don't know can for some people be more discomforting than others. I don't personally understand it. I'm always happy that I don't know what created the universe. Why are we here? How did life start on the planet? I don't know. It's fine. It's why nobody else has ever known. I'm still going to make coffee. You know, I can watch porn tomorrow. It's fine. I'm happy. That's much more interesting to me than the idea of like having to struggle with the existential crisis of how the universe began. I've said this a few times, but I think it's always worth repeating that to me, the universe is either eternal in some way, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. It started at some point, somehow, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, or something else, which also makes no sense to me whatsoever. So no matter which of those three things you choose for the origin of the universe and reality as we know it, I sure as shit don't have a goddamn clue as to it. Doesn't make any sense to me. But why should it? Why should it make sense to us? You know, like the reality is, I did this video. I need to finish this video, but in this video that I talk about the idea of an ant and trying to imagine an ant's trying to understand what the London Stock Exchange is doing. And of course, an ant has got no clue about the London Stock Exchange. But because of some changes to the London Stock Exchange, maybe you could imagine that one company overnight becomes more profitable than another company, and maybe this company has more money available to it because of some changes in the London Stock Exchange. And as a result of having more money, they might decide that they can employ some new people. And because they are employing new people, they need to build a new car park. And so they get some surveyors out to find the right spot. So because the surveyors look at the land and they say, this is the right place for the car park, they get some builders in, clear the land and start pouring concrete. And they pour concrete on the bit of land right on top of the ant's nest. And the ant is now going to be completely doomed by this concrete. And as the concrete's falling down, I'm sure if the ant could think about these things, the ant would say, why is this happening? And like, how would you even begin to explain to an ant what was causing this? Yeah. And why do we think we should be able to even understand the answers to those questions? I mean, it's kind of strange to me that we would. I know. Yeah. It's kind of whenever when you consider the fact that maybe you are an animal and you are having a subjective experience, a physical experience, maybe like it's not supposed to make sense. Maybe like you're only asking why because that's like how you came to, like your ancestors came to like live, is because they had to ask why, and that's how they were surviving. And like we're not supposed to know that why. These are great questions to ask. They're not great questions to answer. Because the reality is it's important. I love the fact that we ask why, that we try to figure out. It's the origin of science. It's like, but our science starts from the middle and is slowly working its way out. Religion tries to start at the end by saying, this is the answer and this is how we're going to make it fit. And I get it. For some people, it definitely could be very comforting. To have an answer and be so confident in it. And it doesn't matter that you don't really believe it or understand it. It doesn't make sense. All you need to do is just have faith, and that's enough. And I can see how for some people, if they can do it, it can be comforting. It doesn't make it true. and it certainly doesn't make it particularly rational. But I can understand how it can be comforting to some people. And there are all kinds of desperately miserable things in our life. It's so funny that people, it's not funny at all really, but it's kind of strange to notice that, for example, death is a very difficult thing for human beings to deal with. And sometimes the idea of somebody passing away is what drives them to religion. But in an entirely opposite case, somebody passing away will be what drives somebody away from religion.
Yeah.
In the one instance, they look to God and hope that there's an afterlife. And in another instance, they can't understand why God would do this to that person and take them away, and end up having to confront the idea that maybe there is no God. I was talking to somebody, Lisa, the other day. It was a fun interview, and we were talking about how in the hardest moments of your life, you looking to God could be comforting, but it's also the very same moment that you could also lose your faith, and then you're not just left with the difficult moment, but you're also left with the whole idea that faith has just become nonsensical to you, and you've got nothing to support your worldview. That's a double whammy, and no mistake. Now you've got a genuine human difficulty. But yeah, religion is fascinating. It's going to be here for forever. I strongly suspect. I don't think we're going to get rid of it anytime soon. I think it's always going to be compelling to some people, some idea of religious, and we keep reinventing them. When we look at Scientology, look at Mormonism's fairly new. We're inventing new religions. Some people talk about the idea of sort of the earth, eco-environmentalism has sort of has newly developed some sort of slightly hippie-ish narratives of like looking after the earth, and that humans are sort of originally sinful by damaging the earth, and that we have to. So it's kind of potentially has sort of religious-like characteristics. Absolutely, yeah. And you could look at, say, different political movements increasingly have religious-like characteristics. I mean, I wouldn't say that they were religions per se, but they certainly have religion-like characteristics to them. So I think there's definitely things in human nature that sort of constantly keep falling for the same trick. And I think it's definitely worth noticing. And I think one of the things that you must realize by that is that to be empathetic to those people that still can't see the trick being done. Because it clearly is not an easy thing for human beings generally. We still keep falling into the same patterns of behaving and falling for these things. So there definitely is something in us that is liable to be easily tricked in this way. But anywho,
reminding ourselves of that, I think, is important. That other people are in something that, like, for me, I guess I was in too, and I was harsh in the beginning whenever I had conversations with people. And I don't know why. Because I just got out of it. And so I knew firsthand what it was like. But yeah, that's part of why I like street epistemology, is because yeah, if it comes from a genuine place of just not wanting to like change their mind, but wanting to like them to understand why they believe something, then yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's like I kind of like start to assume things like, oh, their life might be better if they like are out of it, but I don't know if that's true for everyone.
It's difficult to assume. Generally speaking, I think it's better to have an uncomfortable truth than a comforting falsity. I think it's probably true that that's the way. I think the problem, even with people who believe in, let's say, nice, like spiritual or religious ideas, and I think the problem is that if you allow people to think, or they allow themselves, I should say, to think certain things are true based on bad evidence, even if that particular thing is not harmful to them, just merely the fact that they allow themselves to believe something on bad evidence could certainly lead them to then later on believe other things on bad evidence. So maybe at this moment they're just a sort of believe in the power of crystals and things, but then the next minute they're sort of being swindled for their life savings by some charlatan priest who's sort of convinced them of something else. The reality is that it's not a good protection, I guess, and I think rationality is a good protection, as good a protection as we have, I think, from believing unfortunate things that could harm us.
That's a good point that I didn't think about, honestly.
It's cool. Well, this is what we do. We have lots of interesting conversations, and yeah, these things come out. It's a good community. So, Leah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this. It's been a really fun conversation. Your journey is a fascinating one, and I would say keep being an independent thinker, I'd say, and you know, go where it feels right. And I really hope you get more interested in the street epistemology community, because I actually think you'd really like it. It sounds like you've got all of the right characteristics for a great street epistemologist. And to be frank, we need more female faces in our community, because it is a totally male-dominated space, it seems, almost. And yeah, I don't think there's anything particularly that's causing that, but I do think it's a problem. So you're more than welcome.
What do people do? Once they learn how to do this, do they just incorporate it into their daily lives, or do they also like go out in the streets, or like? What?
It's a great question. I'm laughing because it's such an obvious but also really not clear at all thing. So street epistemology is essentially just a way of having questions. It's for me, I see street epistemology as the intention of having a conversation with somebody, which with the intention of encouraging them to reflect on their reasons why they believe what they believe. That's the key. So you can have a conversation with a friend or a family member or a colleague, and you can use the tools that street epistemology uses to help somebody else maybe notice whether or not they're believing something for good or bad reasons. And so all it really is the intention. So anytime you're having a conversation with somebody and you've stopped trying to argue with them and you're not actually pushing your ideas, and you just want to help them explore their own beliefs. So whether that's somebody that isn't sure about something, is trying to come to a decision, or thinks they know something that might not be true, you can go through this process with them. Okay. One component of that is the sort of very public facing component of that, which is the street interviews on YouTube, where people will go out on the street and just ask random people to explore a belief with the street epistemologist. And those can be super good fun. And they can be really rewarding as well, because you get to hear all kinds of interesting people with all kinds of really, really crazy and out there ideas. And it's just amazing. So getting better at it, learning to practice it, and then putting it into practice, whether it's with friends and colleagues or whether it's with other people on the Discord server. We do a practice session. There's a street epistemology practice sessions that run weekly at different times. Excuse me 1 second. I've been holding that in for like ages. So yeah, you can participate in the practice sessions and chat with other people trying to practice the method and try to practice the approach. There's also a street epistemology course coming out fairly soon, or we hope it's fairly soon. That's going to provide sort of a guided tour through how to apply the street epistemology tools and the ideas inside street epistemology. So those things are coming out and are available. So yeah, grab a YouTube channel or just chat to your friends and family.
So the practice thing that you said.
You're actually being attacked by your cat. like no joke. What the fuck just happened? Wait.
She wants to be fed. It happens.
That's no joke.
Usually I feed her. So I'm trying not to feed her yet because I'm talking to you.
She's not impressed.
She's been sitting here trying to slowly attack me, and I've been scooting away. So the Discord server, whenever we're practicing street epistemology, is it like face-to-face or is it through messages?
No, so the Discord server, on the Discord server, there's loads of chat rooms with loads of chat conversations going on in real time, just like any other Discord server. But the practice sessions especially, they're usually done voice only. So they're normally just voice conversations. You're welcome to turn your camera on. Some people do, some people don't, but oftentimes they're just voice only. And so some people will be there and they'll make a claim, and other people will step up and act as the street epistemologist and explore the claim.
Or is it real? Like, are their claims
real? Usually the claims are real. And that kind of makes it a little bit hard, because after a while you all get to know each other a little bit better. And so it sometimes can be hard, but it's still really good practice to try to follow the steps and just try to think about how can I encourage this person to think about what they're making a claim about. And so, yeah, it can be really good fun. So I totally advise you to come and check those out, because they're a great way to sort of get a sense of what the community's like and get a sense of what the method's like. So yeah, cool. Really good fun. Awesome. Well, I hope to see you there. Leah, it's been an absolute charm talking to you. I really appreciate you talking about your journey, and it was a really interesting one. Yeah, certainly had some definitely interesting characteristics, and I really hope you enjoy the SE community moving forward. So yeah, thank you very much for doing this. Awesome.
Thank you for the interview.
You're very welcome. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.